Alrighty, we made it, barely. It's March 23rd. We're still surviving, and we had internet issues that we've managed to overcome. So, Eric, you still doing okay over there?
I'm doing great. Other than obviously what's going on around the world, but I get to talk football with you. I'm in a room by myself. There's not a whole lot to complain about at this point.
Do you have any good stories for me? I have one COVID-19 story, I guess, if you will.
Well, other than Brady Poppinga showing that he was positive by tweeting out that Lamar Jackson was a poor man's Taysom Hill, I've been
That's
taking
just racism, isn't it?
I think it is just racism. He also was like had a negative thing about Cam, which was basically like a dog whistle this weekend. So yeah, it's bad. I've been taking pictures of places. Basically, whenever I go to the supermarket, I'll take a picture of stuff. It got really surreal though, where the Starbucks down the street from me went from being okay, you can come in, but you got to leave after, went straight up to a we're closed.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot lately. And so I flew into DC yesterday from LAX. That was a traumatizing experience. Every time someone sneezed, I felt like I was going to drop dead immediately. But then we land in DC and people are everywhere because it was a relatively nice day and the cherry blossoms were out, which is a thing here. So people are just everywhere. So they had to call up the National Guard to shut down the tidal basin, which was fun. But here's what we've got today. So we're going to talk a little bit about New England's situation. Deshaun Watson had a pretty interesting tweet today that should get people excited. And with that, we're going to discuss Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields. Because you could tank for Trevor, but you could fold for Fields too. I don't know if you have any better ones than that, but I think that's pretty
negative decent. Yields for Fields is what our friend Ewan said on the internet. I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly, but yeah, that was a great one.
See, I disagree. I think that one's terrible.
I love
changes to our mock draft. We're gonna talk a little bit about the top 12, 13 picks and how that might have changed after free agency. We have some best remaining free agents, and then we have some fun stuff. Win totals, William Hill released some, so we're going to talk about our favorite ones there, and some draft props. So let's start with New England. Their options are as follows. Jarrett Stidham, some other person they could get this year, tank, and try and get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, or try and trade for Deshaun Watson.
Well, tanking and playing Jarrett Stidham, as I'm going to write about today, are the same thing.
Right.
So Stidham's young, but he stinks. So Stidham got worse every single year he was at Auburn in terms of wins above average. His comps include players like Colt McCoy and Christian Ponder. So playing Stidham is honestly their clearest path towards tanking. So yeah.
So Jarrett Stidham would be a clear tank, but aren't there? So there's some other options out there, right? They could go draft another rookie. They could start Brian Hoyer. Those are all tanking options. What are some options this year that would be okay? Clearly, they're not trying to tank, and it seems like those are Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. Am I missing anybody that's available right now that for this season would not be a tank?
Well, I don't think he's available, but in theory,
Andy Dalton. I forgot Andy Dalton.
Well, no. I don't think he's available, but I think Watson, as you described, is somebody that could be we're going to reboot the franchise now,
What would you have to give for Watson, though? They don't have enough draft capital, do they?
You could go it's Bill O'Brien, dude. That you could go 2 firsts and Joe Thuney.
God, can you imagine?
Yeah, I can. Yes.
2 firsts for Deshaun Watson
and Joe Thuney. Let's throw him in there.
How quickly would Bill O'Brien lose his job if he traded Deshaun Watson?
Very quickly.
How many people would go to those games? No one. Literally no one.
I tweeted this out though. We all goof on Bill O'Brien. And I was trying to trigger Titans people in my mention because A, you have the worst uniforms in the NFL. B, you franchise tagged a running back. C, you gave Ryan Tannehill a 3-year big deal. But like everybody digs on Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien's won what? He won the AFC South in 15, 16, 18, and 19. Like that, like he's won the AFC South with Brian Hoyer at quarterback and Brock Osweiler at quarterback. And then, yes, now with Watson a couple times. Like that division stinks, right? So like I still think that they're a winner with Watson, even without Hopkins. And so I don't think O'Brien would actually trade Watson for anything at this point. But if he did, he would be I don't know if he could like make it out. Like, I don't think he could make it out of there fast enough.
Would you rather? Okay, so clearly the number 3 option is or the last option is to try and compete this year with a crappy quarterback. Because even if, and I talked about this last time, even if they were somehow able to compete, which would technically be a feather in Belichick's cap, right? Because it's like, hey, Brady didn't matter that much because Andy Dalton got me to the playoffs. That really is going to get forgotten quickly should Brady make it to a championship game to the Super Bowl, right? So that's like the worst option. Then you've got tanking versus Deshaun Watson. You got to pick one of those options.
Watson.
Really? Just because
Yeah.
you think you can get him for cheap?
Well, not only that, but I mean, this is, and we have to step back a second here. We are overvaluing the number 1 overall pick. Like, so Lawrence, Fields, Tua, Burrow are all projected on average to be better than Stidham, Dalton, Hoyer, any of these options. But they're still like more than likely going to suck compared to somebody like Watson. You know what I'm saying? So like,
I don't disagree, but you've got to give up a ton to get him. So you have a team that already has nobody on offense. I can't imagine Julian Edelman's there for much longer. N'Keal Harry is you if you couldn't change direction. Like, what is Deshaun Watson going to be playing with?
Right. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think if you're Belichick and you take on Watson, what you are assuming, and I guess this kind of falls flat when you think about Hopkins being the number 1 player there. But ultimately, Watson's dealt with a lot. Like, he's dealt with a terrible offensive line during that time. He's dealt with Bill O'Brien until this past season not calling plays to be particularly conducive to him being safe in the pocket, and a defense that sucks, frankly, right? And so, you said, okay, wide receiver aside, he's been pretty impervious to situations being bad around him. If we got him a number 1 wide receiver, which is certainly something they could do in the draft or you're using, free agency or trade, or, in the future, something they can do, then he'd be that sort of quarterback where it's like, yeah, not a whole lot of the pieces are in place, but pieces have never really been in place for Watson at all.
Deshaun Watson over the past 2 seasons is the 7th highest graded quarterback. So I don't think it's ridiculous to say, hey, even if you get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, those guys in a vacuum, there's no way on average they're as good as Deshaun Watson, certainly. But right. I think you can make the argument that Deshaun Watson on average would not play as well as he has played, because he has had a pretty great set of receivers in Houston.
Yeah.
Hasn't had a particularly tough road in terms of opposing defenses. Like, I think Deshaun Watson's amazing. I thought he should have been in the MVP conversation for a long time last year. But I do think it would be potentially not that pretty if he had to throw to N'Keal Harry. Like, that scares me. And I don't know what the avenue is to get a number 1 receiver. Like, Odell Beckham Jr. might be on the market, but they're not going to just give him away if you have nothing left to trade.
Well, and that's where I think this whole discussion comes down to, because not only are the Patriots without Brady, they're without Duron Harmon, they're without Jamie Collins Sr., they're without Kyle Van Noy, Danny Shelton, Landon Roberts. possibly without Joe Thuney if they get a trade for him. They're already without the second-round pick that they traded for Mohamed Sanu. They wasted a number 1 pick on Sony Michel. Like, this is a classic situation where let's not overthink. Like, if you were in charge of the Patriots, this is a classic do not overthink it. You have equity, right? You have equity for days if you're Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft, like with Robert Kraft. Like, this is a classic, tank the season, and I can guarantee you they're going to be better at tanking than the Dolphins were. They'll probably end up with the top 3 pick, and there's options. Like, we talked about this internally yesterday, but like, we talk about Trevor Lawrence as if he's the number 1 pick no matter what, but like, Justin Fields played better than him last year and is like a pretty damn good prospect himself. And at this time, both of the last 2 seasons, Baker Mayfield was not in the conversation for number 1 overall pick in January of the year he was drafted, let alone, the previous season. And last season at this time, Joe Burrow was an AAF quarterback, right? So there are going to be tons of options for the Patriots here. And everything else is requiring them to sort of shoot the moon, when in reality, like, a quarterback affords you so much variance when drafted at the top of the draft, provided the expectations are proper.
Yeah, and I should say this. In a clean pocket, Deshaun Watson only looks better, right? His biggest issue is that under pressure, he tends to take a ton of sacks. He controls his pressure rate a lot. That would be something that you would expect the Patriots to do a good job of getting out of the system. If anyone could, right? Yeah. It'd be the New England way that would do that. Let's talk about Lawrence and Fields, because, okay, you brought this up last night. You were like, who should be the presumptive number 1 pick right now? And that there is a lot of steam that has been pushed in Trevor Lawrence's direction because of what he did, not this past year, but 2 years ago in the national championship game, right? He played great, all that stuff. Also, he looks the part, right? He has an iconic look. He's 6'6". Like, owners go to sleep and dream about having a quarterback that looks like that.
I mean, Kraft doesn't even have to be asleep.
I set you up. I set you up beautifully for that. So I went into it, and personally, I'm a Trevor Lawrence fan. I think he's fantastic. I really like all the things he does on the field, but I also think that off the field, he strikes me as someone who I can get behind, which I think is really important for someone that's going to lead your locker room. But I took a lot of time today going through and looking at a bunch of different ways in which these guys have graded, with the lens of, hey, Trevor Lawrence played against not a lot of good players and had a heck of a lot of good weapons. Justin Fields is better than Trevor Lawrence, has graded better than Trevor Lawrence in every single situation, both compared to Lawrence this past year and Lawrence from 2 years ago.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm on the Justin Fields bandwagon. Plus, here's the other thing. He's 6'3", 225. It's not as if he's 5'9". Like, there's not, this isn't like David versus Goliath here. Justin Fields is legit.
The interesting thing about Fields, so a lot of times when this stuff happens, it's a socioeconomic thing, right? It's, Lawrence is the number 1 overall recruit out of high school. He's got all the great coaching, yada, 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 right? And then, Fields, whether it be, because he's African-American or whether, but like, generally speaking, folks will underestimate quarterbacks in his situation until it becomes like Kyler Murray, where it's just too much. Like, he's so much better than everybody else, so I have to regard him that way. But Fields is like every bit the superstar pedigree, groomed, going to camps, having private quarterback coaches, all that kind of stuff. And the results show it, right? Like, we look back and you look at Georgia and we think, oh, well, Justin Fields couldn't even beat out Jake Fromm. Well, look at this. Georgia's offense sucks. Okay. So this is a Georgia's offense fault and not a Justin Fields fault, right? Like, that offense stunk.
Georgia's right now where LSU was like a couple years ago. Yeah. Where they just like couldn't realize that they should just spread it out and let their athletes win, and instead they have like no one that can make any moves, and it's not great.
They wouldn't know a good quarterback if it threw the ball right into their face. Like, that's, and so like, Fields goes to Ohio State, and to your point, like, Lawrence started out, he threw 5 interceptions the first 3 games, and then another 3. So he had like 8 interceptions the first 8 weeks, which is not great, but not terrible. He didn't throw another interception the rest of the year. He averaged more than 10 yards per pass attempt in all but 3 games down the stretch. But you look at the teams that he faced, right? So look at the teams that like were actually pretty good. Texas A&M, 7.4 yards per pass attempt. You look down, even like North Carolina ended up being a decent team, 6.9 yards per pass attempt. And then you got South Carolina was a team that was good enough to beat Georgia, 8 yards per pass attempt. And then you got Ohio State less than 8 yards per attempt, LSU 6.3. He basically completed about half his passes during the college football playoff. Like whereas Fields was Fields had like J.K. Dobbins drop a touchdown pass in the semifinal game. Like he every bit played the part in that game. And when I look at these two quarterbacks, our projection system likes Fields slightly. They're both going to be great in terms of like prospects, but right now I got to give the edge to Fields.
So what I looked at was, and this happens a lot, I think people assume that the Ohio State offensive system does quarterbacks a ton of good. So I took out screen passes, I took out short passes, and I looked only at non-play action throws 7+ yards downfield. Fields is better. I looked only at horizontal lead throws, which are by far the most common throw in the NFL. That's by far. Fields by an even larger margin. So he checks the box of, I do the things at the NFL level that happen most frequently. I do them better. And then also checks all the other ancillary pieces that we always talk about, which is, did he have a huge advantage, playing against inferior competition with great playmakers? No, Lawrence had that. He's an unheralded guy that came out of nowhere. No one expected him to do that. That's not the case at all with Justin Fields. So we should plant our flag here right now that Justin Fields is right now in the driver's seat. But both of these guys, it's another situation where they're going to go 1-2. And maybe you have another guy that comes in there and it's 1-2-3.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just at wins above average last year, which is our college version of wins above replacement, last season Joe Burrow was a win 0.3 better than any other quarterback in the college football, and then Justin Fields was second at 1.7 wins above average. Dustin Crum, who's kind of like a runner / he's actually a pretty good player for Kent State, and then it was Trevor Lawrence was fourth, followed by Jalen Hurts. And so, like, Lawrence, we're not saying Lawrence stinks, right? This isn't a Justin Herbert, Jordan Love situation, or even like a Tua situation. Like, I think both of these, I think both of these prospects are better than Tua.
I completely agree.
Tua has the issue of the time value of money, right? You get Tua now, right? He's a year in before these two other players get in the league. So there's a little bit of value added on Tua because you can take him today. But I think, like, as far as, options for New England, I mean, New England's going to luck box into a couple of really good options here. Probably, I think we were talking about this. I think Winston was probably the last quarterback where a year going into his last year, it was like, okay, this guy's the guy. And even Winston kind of sucked his last year before being drafted number 1 by Tampa. But, like, this is unprecedented relative in recent memory.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And to be fair, it's not as if that necessarily helps the guy, right? It almost, there's nothing that says, just because he came out of nowhere, that means this guy's an absolute stud. Like, there's still a bunch of question marks with any of
Well, and we've seen it in the history, right? I mean, we saw, like, Matt Leinart was probably a shoe-in to be the number 1 overall pick if he would have came out in 2005. He stayed in school, famously took 1 credit dancing class, and then not only gets drafted behind, I think he got drafted behind Vince Young, who, like, famously beat him in the national title game. But he was ahead of Cutler, but wasn't there a player that was picked ahead of? Anyway, Leinart fell to 10, right? Herbert was another one. If Herbert would have come out last year, I think that his draft stock would have been higher than coming out this year. Jordan Love's a player who played better last season than he played in 2019. So there's no guarantee that these guys will be great. In fact, statistics would suggest they would regress to the mean a little bit. But as of right now, I think they're 1-2. And I think Fields, as you said, we should plant our flag and say Fields is the better one of the two.
You heard it here first. Anything else you want to add to the whole New England tank situation?
Well, Patriots fans, so as we've brought it up on the hashtag internet, like, people are, like, a little bit are getting a little bit upset about this idea that the Patriots are going to lose some games next year. And to the point where somebody even like offered to bet me like a certain amount of money that they would make the playoffs with Hoyer, which is pretty funny considering Hoyer's probably not even going to start. But like like the best play for them is to tank, and I think if you're a long-term fan of the team, like you should want that to be the case.
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't get it. I wonder if they're just some Patriots fans have got to be Bill Belichick fans, right? And the ultimate win for Belichick is somehow being great with a really crappy quarterback, which will mean their games would not be fun to watch, right? It would be,
Right.
And it's not something that's likely to happen, right? You're hoping for a very uncommon event to occur, which is that your defense is extraordinary, the teams you play kind of suck, like all of these things have to fall into place if you're going to win with a really bad quarterback. But I don't think he's dumb enough to chase that, right? I think he's smart enough to say, really what will help me win this kind of battle of wills in the end against Tom Brady is being successful for 5 years when he's only got 2 years left. And that's what makes it attractive to get Deshaun Watson, because if you could somehow, there's no way, but if you could somehow get him this year, like you can start building towards it. I just can't see that being a possibility, which means that tanking is the option.
Well, and not only that, but like just to finish this off, they have all of the markers of a team that would regress even with a good quarterback, right? Your defense is first in the league in EPA allowed. You lost a decent amount of players.
It regressed over the course of the season.
Yeah, and there's no way Stephon Gilmore is going to be better. Every team in your division's better than they were a season ago, likely, right? And then the AFC is just so top heavy. Like, what's the point at this point? Like, you're not going into Kansas City and beating the Chiefs with Hoyer. I'm sorry, you're not going to beat Baltimore. You couldn't beat Baltimore last year with Brady. You could beat the Chiefs last year with Brady. Like, it makes a lot of sense for them to tear it down and build it back up. Belichick still gets what he wants, which is to win with a different quarterback other than Brady. And New England also saves themselves the embarrassment of trying to win and then being beat by Tampa Bay.
Right.
Like you save some face. It's like, it's like that player that you played with in sports who always got hurt when it was time to win a starting spot, and they could never be told they suck because they always had an excuse. Like that's like the Patriots could tank this year, and then it absolves them from a decent amount of blame, when in reality it's part Brady left and part the fact that they went all in for the last few years and the bill came due.
Then they get Justin Fields, and the rest is history. All right, let's talk about mock draft changes. Going through the top 13, and first pick Joe Burrow, no change there. I get to number 2. And we did our original mock draft with no trades. But now we're looking at it. Miami doesn't seem like they have any interest in signing anybody that's out there, even though I think Winston would be cool. If they go up to get Tua at number 2, and that kind of creates, I think, something interesting, which is, okay, number 3, you have the Lions. There's no reason for anyone to trade with them because there's no quarterback there. So say they take Okuda. The Giants are there. We've talked about how we think they should take a wide receiver. And if they do, good for them. But I'm going to guess there's no chance in hell they take a wide receiver because the Giants. So then you have the Washington Redskins sitting there at 5, the number 1 wide receiver on the board. You already have Terry McLaurin. That division isn't super strong. You get the number 1 wide receiver. And you all of a sudden put together kind of a team. Like you got a little offense there. I know no Trent Williams, but he wasn't there last year either. So that was the thing that when I was going through it, I was like, this might be the change that would be the most interesting in the top 5. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be enticing for them to take a lineman, obviously, because there are good linemen available. But I don't think you could sell it to if you're a new head coach in Ron Rivera, right? It's going to be hard for them to sell. Okay, we traded back, and we got a left tackle. You know what I'm saying? You already gave up on Chase Young. You trade back, and you think, okay, we got to get somebody who lights it up. right? And whether it be Judy or Ruggs or Lamb or one of those receivers that's near the top there, it gives you a solid. I mean, McLaurin's a great receiver that kind of does all the wins in the right places. It might be a place where Ruggs takes the top off the defense, or obviously Judy's a great all-around prospect. But I do like that. I do like that idea, especially if they take the chance to get one of these available free agent quarterbacks to push Haskins.
Kyle Allen.
Well, they just got Kyle Allen, but which is funny. I mean, if today doesn't tell you anything about how inbred the NFL is in some regard, I don't know what will. Where PJ Walker goes to place for his college coach in Carolina, and then they trade Kyle Allen to his first NFL coach, Ron Rivera. Same day, sort of so we're
Kyle
just
Allen should not be scaring Dwayne Haskins, but that was the big thing that I thought would be interesting to watch. You could make the argument for the offensive tackle there, because you could say, okay, well, the wide receiving class is super deep. Also, it appears there's a side. So someone's getting arrested out there. Maybe someone left at home. The offensive tackle, group is super deep. The wide receiver draft is super deep. So it would probably come down to, hey, which of our guys do you think the market value, which of our top guys does the market value less? Because you're probably going to get 2 first-round picks from Miami to trade up. And you go, okay, we'll use one of these picks on a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, and then we'll do the reverse with their next pick, whoever's available there. So I think it's a spot for Washington to get better and get better quickly. Other thoughts you had on how the top 13 might change?
Yeah, so I certainly thought with Bulaga in the mix, I thought that the Chargers might want to go with somebody like Judy at 6 or Ruggs, depending upon who we decide to go first among those two players. I think obviously you add him to an offense with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry. You give whomever's playing quarterback there a fair shake. I think 6 is way too high for Justin Herbert, for example. The other one that I liked as far as a change, I liked Tristan Wirfs. I liked him to Arizona now that Arizona's got the Hopkins in the mix. I think that you have some receivers there, but you can now bolster the offensive line now that you have a critical mass at wide receiver. And I have you guys, the San Francisco 49ers at 13, going to Diggs now.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Because I think the Niners are going to be a team that we can use as a teachable moment for coverage, because they were great in coverage last year. But it's sort of one of those where it's it's great to be great at coverage. It's even better to be sort of more stable there. And I think depending upon K'Wan Williams, Richard Sherman, and Emmanuel Mosley to all be good again is a little bit speculative. If you give yourself another body in that room, I think you give yourself a chance. And the Niners even showed that when Ahkello Witherspoon started to struggle, and they went immediately to Mosley in the playoffs, and they patched it up quite well, at least until the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. So it's I think that a lot of people want them to go wide receiver there, but I think that Shanahan is far more able to scheme guys like Samuel and Pettis and those kind of guys, Bourne, all those guys open.
Pettis, yeah.
Yeah, more than Pettis is a second-round pick. I don't understand why they're not playing
himself onto the field.
Yeah, but they're going to be far more likely to curb the issues associated with bad receivers than bad defensive backs.
Okay. I personally love that. I have a couple thoughts on things you said. The first was I had the same note on the Chargers, which is, okay, you got Bulaga, and they're probably going to take Justin Herbert, which is hilarious, right? But what if they went Isaiah Simmons?
Yeah, I also put that there.
We're going to have the most – imagine having Isaiah Simmons and Derwin James on the same defense. How – that would just be fun. We talked a couple podcasts ago about the amazing article you wrote, how important it is to have depth in coverage. And having depth, but also having flexibility, depth from a flexibility perspective, right? You have all these players who now can do like 4 different things on any given play. To me, that would just be exciting to see how good it could be. And you already have a bunch of weapons, offensively. Tyrod Taylor, average quarterback, like you could legit be a decent team given how bad the Broncos and Raiders are going to be. And then with San Francisco, I thought it was really interesting. We had at number 13 the Colts taking Laviska Shenault, and one of the things that he reminded me of was how the Niners used Deebo Samuel last year. Oh, the Colts can use Laviska Shenault similarly. Chenault's a little bigger, but that would be cool. Like the Niners, they don't exactly have depth at receiver right now. I mean, they theoretically do, but really in terms of what they've shown on the field, don't. So I could certainly see that happening. What I would really love to happen is some team fall in love with Justin Herbert, him still be on the board, and the Niners would then trade down and get 2 players instead of 1.
Yeah, I think Herbert was always mocked to 13, and then Love was always mocked to 14th. I think if the Niners could take advantage of that situation, it would be a very, very, very good April for them. And anytime you can have a great April without having taken a player yet, you're in a good spot. And especially given, so I went through and like kind of redid all of our picks I showed you. The only one I couldn't think of was Seattle. I just put no clue because I honestly have no idea what they would, because they have so many needs, but it's sort of in weird spots. But when I was sort of looking through, like the Niners could move back 3, 4, 5 picks and still get a good defensive back or wide receiver. And that's really where they're weak, right? I mean, weaker. They're not weak anywhere, but weaker. And that really puts them in a nice spot, right? I mean, it really puts them in a nice spot as far as team building and the like.
What I think makes the call go in your favor. So say they stay at 13, they can't get anyone to move. You also have that pick at the back of the first round. You say to yourself, okay, well, am I going to take a corner or a receiver? Well, if both things are equal, the cornerback is probably a bigger need given the fact that Kyle Shanahan's pretty darn good at what he does.
Yep.
Secondarily, the corner class is far weaker than the wide receiver class. So, it can be a place where you can get kind of the best of both worlds if you have a guy, the market doesn't value as much in the receiver position that you can get later on. Maybe you have to trade up a few spots to get them, but you've already accumulated, it's a net win for you. Kind of like what the Ravens did.
If you take a wide receiver at 13, you probably have to trade up with the second first round pick to get who you want at corner. And that to me is just maybe not the best thing for them to do.
Well, any other thoughts on mock changes?
Yeah, I'm wondering, so maybe for the next mock, I wonder what you think about this, but maybe we also do one, we also try to pick a player for every team that doesn't have a first round pick because that group is getting quite big. But what was interesting was when we looked at the draft, the mock, we were struggling finding a player Buffalo would really want / need, and they sort of erased that for us by trading for Stephon Diggs. So that was interesting, putting Minnesota there, and Minnesota needs basically everything. So that was a solid move. Trying to think of other ones. Teams didn't really fill a lot of holes. Which is, I think Dallas maybe doesn't take a safety now that they got Clinton Dix. But it was a pretty interesting free agency period, but I don't think it changed the mock all that much.
I agree. I had trouble finding anything that changed dramatically. So what we'll do for our next one is we'll include some trades. I think that would make it more exciting. And we'll talk a little bit more about teams that don't have a first round pick. And maybe we'll also come up with a couple of spots where, look, hey, teams could go either way. Here are like the 2 players, ranked 1 and 2 that we would like to give them. So stay tuned for that. Let's talk best remaining free agents real quick. Jameis, Jadeveon Clowney, Robbie Anderson, Kel Roby-Coleman, Rashad Perriman, Logan Ryan. I think the biggest question to me is who's going to overpay Jadeveon Clowney, and will it actually be the Seahawks?
Well, you saw that, like, was it Madden that, like, had Clowney going to the Titans? Like, it had him, like, shape-shifting into a Tennessee Titans player.
Yeah.
Tennessee overpaying for Clowney would be like the tic-tac-toe of, like, a bad offseason.
Brilliant offseason moves.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
But it'd be the perfect, like, it'd be, we talked about how it was bad, and literally everyone that is a common average fan would bring their pitchforks out, like, you idiots, how do you get paid to do this? Did you even see who they signed? Like, it would be fuel to the fire.
Meanwhile, they get rid of Logan Ryan, who's, like, probably their best corner and still bad, and then like, they can't cover anybody, but they got Clowney. You know, Clowney's not even this is a hot take, but Clowney's a great all-around player, but as far as rushing the passer, he's no better than Cameron Wake.
No way.
So, like,
Cameron Wake's actually well above average.
Yeah, so that would be. I think Tennessee's in the running. I wonder if Indianapolis just says forget it. Like, Houston's a flaming pile of poo. Tennessee just signed Tannehill for, FFS, and then and Jacksonville's tanking. Like, why? Let's just lean completely in and use all of our. Because if you take Clowney and you put him on a D line with DeForest Buckner and Justin Houston, that's pretty fierce. They can't cover anybody still, but I think there's a train of thought that could lead to a good defensive group. They just got rid of Pierre Desir, so I don't know what that means. But
I've got
what other team do you think?
For Clowney, man, I just don't know. I could kind of see I thought the Giants would maybe make a play for him, but they seem. I would guess they think they've got a good chance of getting Chase Young. Here's the couple of interesting ones are. So if Jameis doesn't have a starting spot, and he's looking at places where it would be advantageous to be a backup, I was thinking of a couple of places there. The first one that came to mind was New Orleans. But, Taysom Hill, the second coming of Steve Young, is there. The second place is Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. Is Jameis even that much worse than Big Ben at this point?
No, I don't think there's any reason to believe he's that much worse. I mean, there's a lot of question marks with Big Ben right now, obviously. But you figure he doesn't have that many, years left. But you could go there and you could kind of they're a team that's in the news a lot. You could, like, reestablish your credibility as, like, being a good team first guy. And then next year someone goes, they've kind of forgotten about the 30 interceptions and maybe the narrative is positive, and you can go somewhere and get a starting job. But that spot intrigued me a lot, along with the Saints for Jameis.
Yeah, I think I like that one a lot. Obviously, the ones that have stopped making sense are Chicago and Los Angeles Chargers, just for reasons. And the way that the Rams have it structured with Goff kind of is not going to be in the cards there for him. I mean, it's a tough bit, right? I mean, you could think about let's say Watson does get traded, right? Then maybe Houston is a designation for him, or destination. I'm sorry. But yeah, obviously we liked the Dolphins last week. I still think the Dolphins, should they not actually take a quarterback this year, would be a great place for Jameis to go play.
Yes, agreed. We talked about this last time. I think it's a perfect spot. And then they should go out and try and sign, like, Robbie Anderson or Rashad Perriman.
Yeah.
They could legit win that division. All right, let's do some win totals. You ready?
Oh,
This is fun. Okay, so
I've already invested a significant amount in some of these.
Good, same. So William Hill tweeted out win totals for this coming season. You can go check it out. Just go to William Hill, their Twitter account, and we both circled a few. I'll let you start. Just give me your top. Give me the one that you're scrolling down and it, like, jumped out of the computer screen and just slapped you in the face.
Oh wow. I mean, Rams under 9 wins, even at -140, is probably my favorite on the board.
Now, had you seen the Rams' new logo before making the bet, or was this pre, like, the official rollout of their whole new creative?
No, this is after just seeing some things, like how they handle the Todd Gurley, like the Jared Goff thing, the fact that it sounds like there's a rumor that they might trade Brandon Cooks for Anthony Harris. Like, what? I think the Rams, a combination of being in a division where, I give you a lot of shit, but the Niners are a pretty damn good team. So the Niners, Arizona's not going to be a pushover this year. Seattle is never an easy team to beat. You have, obviously, like, going into a new stadium, there's going to be, like, the pressures associated with that. And then, like, it's just, they lost a lot of defensive players and their most valuable one in Wade Phillips. Like, I don't see them being better than 500.
Yeah, I circled the Rams under 9 too, and the reasoning is pretty simple. There is a legit shot that they have the worst offense in that division.
Yeah.
A very legit shot. Sean McVay, who, like, I think both of us have faith in had faith in for a greater part of the past 2 seasons, as a guy that was going to innovate, right? We talked about this last year. He's got to make some schematic changes to make his offense better prepared to handle the defenses that clearly stopped what he started with in Los Angeles. It didn't really happen last year. Like, their offensive line broke down, but dude, there are offensive lines that are patchwork all the time in the NFL. I mean, the Chiefs had, just a bunch of random guys playing on the interior of their line. The Niners, the same thing. The Niners had both their tackles out for a while and have random guys playing on the interior. And they couldn't figure out a way to get a quick game going that could matriculate the ball down the field, where every other team in the NFL does that. I mean, the Niners.
There are systematic problems. So McVay is a terrific offensive mind by all accounts, but there are systematic, and like, if we were training a machine learning model around McVay's offense, the errors would not be, like, normally distributed. Let's just put it that way. Like, it's not. There are systematic problems with his offense that, until he addresses them, will always, like, there are right?
No, they absolutely are.
Okay, here's another one that I really liked, and I actually didn't put this into the doc, but it just sticks out at me like a sore thumb. Raiders under 7.5 wins.
Oh,
minus 110.
I did write that one down.
I would, and again, some of these, like, you can get better prices other places. I would take under 7.
Raiders,
but if I'm getting 7.5, I am.
Raiders under 7.5 stuck out to me for a similar reason. Chargers over 7.5 stuck out to me as well. And to me, so this is why it stuck out to me. The Raiders suck. The Broncos quarterback, we have no idea. I think people are overvaluing what he's probably going to do. They are at 7.5 as well. The Broncos and the Chargers, like, I know things happen to the Chargers, but the Broncos, Chargers, and Raiders are all not equal. Like, the Chargers are the better team of that group. Even if Tyrod Taylor starts, like, Tyrod Taylor is at worst tied with Derek Carr as the best quarterback of that group. And they have a ton of playmakers. So it stuck out to me.
Yeah. Tyrod Taylor took Buffalo teams that were far worse than this Chargers team to basically, like, 8-8, right? And, like, didn't have nearly these like, type of talent, right?
No, that was my reasoning. I just thought 7.5 for all 3 of those teams was ridiculous, and the Chargers also have the number 6 pick, so that should not be. Well,
the Raiders did not win a game last season that was decided by more than a touchdown. They had a fun little plucky season where our friends at the Ringer wrote about how great they drafted. 7 games in, I remember we goofed about it a little bit at the time. and like ultimately they regressed as you would expect. They had some cool wins. Winning in London against the Bears was pretty fun. Obviously, some other, they beat the Chargers, I think, at least once, and those are good wins, but like they're all, close, like random noise wins. You run it back, they're probably a 5-11 team fundamentally.
Okay, here's one that I like a lot. The Detroit Lions over 6.5. My reasoning is pretty simple. They, before Matt Stafford got hurt, were a better team than the record indicated. Their offense was really quite solid. They have a top 3 pick that is not indicative of how bad their team was. And I know they lost Darius Slay, but Darius Slay last season, they weren't using him correctly. So I don't know that we should view it as this enormous loss for the Lions, even though we view it as a huge game for the Eagles. They picked up Trufant. If they pick up Okudah here, what's laughable to me is that they're 6.5, and the Bears are 8.5. So similarly, I like the Bears under 8.5.
And the Vikings are. I got the Vikings at 9.5 the other day, and I'm sorry, Vikings fans that listen to our show. I mean, that is egregious. Like, if you look at this division, the Packers probably are going to get to 10-11 wins just based upon how bad the Bears and the Vikings are. And even though last season they were 13-3, more fundamentally a 9-7 team, 10-6 team, all that plays really well into the Detroit Lions, who, you could say a lot about that culture. Like, people will talk about, how bad the culture was for Detroit. But if you watch, like, they played hard for Patricia last year. I don't understand people trying to, like, bury Patricia for reasons other than, his like looks or whatever, right? But like, they played the Packers down to the wire in week 17 when they had nothing to play for other than to ruin the Packers' chance at a first round bye, right? And they lost a lot of games really close.
The over
they played
6.5 is even money too, which I know. I read 6.5 wins and I go, oh, it's going to be minus 140 or something. It's.
They were 3-3-1 after beating the Giants, right? Mm-hmm. They had last season they had 1-score losses to Kansas City, to Green Bay, to Oakland, to Chicago, to Dallas, to Washington, to Chicago again, and then again to Green Bay. Like, and the latter half of those games were started by either Driscoll or Blau. Like, this team didn't quit on Patricia. Like, they were 3-4-1 after, when Stafford went down with an injury. Like, this team doesn't suck. They could use some corners. They could use some pass rush. They could use, a third. They got Amendola back. They could use some production from Hawkinson, but he's a young tight end. They're pretty good offensively up front. Like, I agree with you 100%. And I honestly, I placed a bet on them to win the NFC North at plus like 900 because I think that's a good play too.
Yep, I like it. I have a couple more. Do you have a couple more?
Yeah, one. I had Cowboys over 9.5.
Ooh. I knew this. I knew you were going to have this one, and I can't decide if we are being a little too kind to our friend Mike McCarthy.
Well, we know Mike personally, so it's sort of,
It's hard for me not to root for him. That was a humble brag, by the way. He was a cool dude. He has talked a lot about how he's going to change some things up. I think we found out a lot of the issues in Green Bay were not on Mike McCarthy. I think that is probably the biggest feather in his cap that he should have. And the Cowboys theoretically are incredibly talented, right? They have Mari Cooper back. They have Dak. What I am worried about is the fact that they couldn't find a way to sign Dak Prescott. And so every single press conference, every single morning show is going to lead with what the hell is happening with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. And that's just hard to deal with.
Yeah. No, I mean, asking a team to win 9 games or to win 10 games is really tough,
Right.
And so I don't know. I mean, this is not as strong. Like, I I like the Vikings and Rams unders a lot more than I like this over, but I just like unders in general because I feel like we always underestimate how many things can go wrong.
No, I'm with you.
But they do have an easy division. They do have, obviously a new coach and a newish scheme tends to prop things up a little bit. They were fundamentally far better than a 9.5 win team last year. So some of those things I think will be in their favor. It's just a question of, how frustrated you want to be in November when you're grinding out, they're 7-6 or something like that,
Right. Okay, this is the one that I think people will hate the most, but I love it. Patriots under 9 wins.
I mean, I think that's there are universes where that's a lock within the next month.
Even if Bill Belichick sits there and goes, you know what? Fuck this. I'm going to win with Andy fucking Dalton. Dude, Andy Dalton is going to play. They're going to play in a primetime game. Andy Dalton is going to throw a pick six so bad that the Patriots are going to fucking storm the field and take him out. Like, Patriots fans are going to lose their damn mind when Andy Dalton is playing in a primetime game. Andy Dalton's fine, but there's no way. If Andy Dalton is the Patriots quarterback, I love the fact that I would have under 9 wins. The only way that I would be afraid if I had the Patriots at under 9 wins is if Deshaun Watson were their quarterback, and I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, but
there's a legit shot they tank, in which case this is obviously a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
so tell me I'm stupid.
No, I don't. I think here's the thing. To me, it's why unders are such the better play for win totals because A, if you add them up for most books, I haven't added the ones up for William Hill. Obviously, you have to adjust for juice, but it ends up being more than 256 almost all the time. So unders are almost always a better play, everything else being equal. But then the second thing is I sort of think about this with respect to Indianapolis. We do our simulation last year. We come out with about 9.2 wins. It's 9.5. Okay, I just based upon our model bet blindly the under for the Indianapolis Colts. What happens? Well, their quarterback retires. And then now you're sitting on a ticket that is almost, and granted, they had a nice little run during the first half of the season, but you have a ticket that's almost assuredly a win, right? And like there are so many instances where that's true for the under and it's not for the over. Like you look at Philadelphia, right? That one year where they signed everybody, Nnamdi Asomugha, Vince Young, all that kind of stuff, and they still go 8-8, right? Like there are so many more circumstances where everything goes wrong for a team, and the under is such a stone cold, cinch lock. Then everything goes right for a team.
Yep. And with you, I have a couple in that vein. I have a couple more unders, but I'll let you. First.
Yeah, let me. So along those lines, I like this sounds stupid because I'm a fan, but I think the value here is on Kansas City under 11.5 plus 120.
I'm glad you brought this up because here's my question. The Chiefs and the Ravens are both 11.5. If I sit here and I go, okay, I got to bet, I don't think both these teams are winning 12 games. One of them is going to go under. Which one would you rather have the under on?
I would rather have the Ravens under than the Chiefs.
Same.
Because there's more. So, and again, these are all bad reasonings in a vacuum, but it sort of is. The Chiefs have never gone under their win total with Andy Reid. The only tricky part is that
we're fine.
It is a trend zone.
Did you steal that from Clay Travis?
Well, no, the Chiefs are actually, they broke his ATS thing where like you're 7-0 against the spread against really good efficient offenses when you suck.
No, we need to rehash this. If you
if he doesn't die of the coronavirus taking his own advice, we'll make fun of him. But as of now, he might be a dead man in a week. So let's just lay off him.
Anyone listening has not seen this. Go look up last year's whatever this Fox betting show is. He had these two trends for why to bet against the Chiefs or why to bet on the Titans. and it was like the Titans are 5-0 against offenses that average 6+ yards per play.
Yeah, I'm looking at this now.
And it's absolutely, like, all you have to do is think about it for probably 0.2 seconds to figure out that this is probably the worst trend of all trends that you could possibly come up with. And then he doubled down on it the next week when the Titans played the Chiefs and basically used the same version of it, right?
Yeah.
Did you find it?
And then, no, it was, let me look at, okay. Give me your next one that you. So
Yes.
let's talk about Kansas City for a second here, because again, you winning. So Chiefs have won 12 or more games three of the last 4 years. But winning 12 games, I don't think people understand that the base rate for winning 12 games is extremely low.
No, people don't get that, especially because most people concerned. So when someone goes into betting a total, they let their proclivities kind of like steer them, right? So if you naturally like Lamar Jackson, you're going to go, well, if you like their under, you hate Lamar Jackson. It's like, no, actually, I just think there's a chance they win 10 or 11 games instead of 13.
Yeah.
And like when that happens, I'm going to cash this bet, especially because, look, as much as what Lamar Jackson and the Ravens did last year was incredible, their variance on fourth downs, they could continue to go for them at a very high rate. But I mean, they could just be slightly worse at converting them. They were amazing at converting them. They're slightly worse at converting them, and they go 12-4. They're also playing a harder schedule. Like, there are all these things that I think, come into play here, whereas the Chiefs are sort of used to this. So if I had to take the under on one of them, I think the Ravens would be the one that I'd take the under on. I don't think I would bet the over for either, to be honest.
No, and like I bet the Chiefs over 10 flat last year, which I thought was okay. But even then, a statistical model is never going to get you out to a median of 11.5, right? So it's almost everybody.
It's a good way to tell if someone is actually doing math or not.
Yeah, it's almost never going to be a model play. But the hard part is this is a market, so you're paying a premium. And no one likes to watch Seren Petro, one of our great listeners and a host in Kansas City, will almost never bet against the Chiefs because they're his favorite team. And I'm not saying I'm going to lay money on this under here, but I do think it has, you're paying a premium, minus 140 for the over.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's incredible.
But if I'm going to pick one of these teams to go over, it's Kansas City, and the reason is last season we had a lot of regression in the Chiefs' offense. Mahomes got hurt, a lot of players got hurt on offense. And Mahomes threw literally half as many touchdown passes in 2019 as he did 2018. And, their defense got a little bit better and they got some luck. So they got to 12 wins. The Ravens had an MVP, that was Lamar's MVP year last year, and their defense played amazingly. If either one of those regresses, it's going to be really hard in AFC North. That includes the Browns, who are pretty talented, and Pittsburgh, who's coming back. And then, of course, the number one overall pick in Joe Burrow will probably make the Cincinnati Bengals more competitive than they were last year. The Chiefs the Chiefs haven't lost to the Broncos since 2015. So it's just a simpler road for them.
All right, I have a couple more. Let me pull them up here. So the ones that I have not brought up, I have another under, and this is my 49ers. It's 10.5.
Yeah.
10.5 is a high number. That division is so good. So just look at the Houston Texans, right? I think there's a 6 and there's a ton of juice on the over. I mean, they're going to be way better. The Seahawks have Russell Wilson. And the 49ers are what I'm looking at is where are teams that did really well in situations that are super unstable. And as great as the Niners offense was, their defense was also amazing. And that's something that you would expect to regress a little bit. We mentioned the whole coverage thing, right? It doesn't help that they, pilfered the Indianapolis Colts to the 13th pick. But 10.5, I think, is a little high. And there's going to be people love the 49ers. So you're probably going to get a good price on this. Right now, the under is plus 130. So I like that. I also like I mentioned the Bears under 8.5 and the Packers under 10, which I'm obligated by law to bet on. And then one more over that I like is the Washington Redskins at 5.5. They have a high pick. Don't believe incredibly highly in that division. And I just don't think that their win total should be a half game short of what the Giants are. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a fade of Daniel Jones.
Yes.
And that's something that I can get on board with. Jones threw 13 of his 24 touchdowns in 3 games last year. So he's certainly being overvalued, I think. There's no reason Washington should have a full win less than the Giants. So, okay, let's talk about draft props because here's the thing. Like, there's always this cloud of uncertainty with respect to the season. Probably, we're probably fine, but
probably.
We're
I thought you were saying
okay.
in general. Yes.
Yeah.
There is a cloud of uncertainty.
But even even all these bets become no bets if they play 15 games because they have to start the season a week later or something. You know what I mean? Like, but there is a draft on, and from all indications they are going to do this draft, and also by May 1st you'll know if you have won this money or not.
Hold on.
That's kind of
real quick. How do you feel right now? Because we talked yesterday when I got off the plane.
Yep. And
we talked a little bit about, like, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think right now, like in the bottom of your heart? How do you feel the next 3-4 months go with respect to football?
Well, I'm being a little bit informed here by the market because I've looked at some props for other sports, like when will baseball start, when will basketball start. I would say with everything that's riding on the NFL from a TV perspective, I would be extremely surprised if we did not have some form of football come September. That being said, it might be a lot different than what we're used to. I think that, for example, fans probably won't be allowed at training camp. Players might miss time because it might be something where they are constantly taking COVID tests, and if they're out for 2 weeks or something like that, right? And I think that there's a far more significant chance that they play the season without fans than they don't play the season.
I agree.
But just to back this up for people who are nervous, and I know the betting markets don't tell you everything, but it is a better than even money chance that basketball and baseball start after July 1st. If you look at the betting markets, it is a better than even chance they start before August 1st. So
a couple things that we discussed yesterday that I totally agree with. Talked to Peter King a little bit, our good friend, and he said one of the things that he brought up that I thought was interesting was, like, there are owners out there that think that there's a really much higher than zero chance that we don't have games, which I thought was really interesting. But then you think about it and you go, okay, well, things are probably going to get worse for a little while. There are a couple of scenarios where they get worse, but they really impact the NFL. So a couple of options would be like a bunch of NFL players test positive for it, right? To the point where certain teams are really going to be debilitated, And I think that could potentially postpone some games. But if you look at CBS, if CBS doesn't have the NFL, like, they may as well just kiss everything goodbye because they don't have they already lost the March Madness tournament, the NCAA tournament, and they've lost the Masters so far. So, like, 2 of the 3 things that they have gone away. So I think you could very legitimately see, I think the betting favor right now is you have games without fans to start the season.
Well, so, and NBC might, it sounds like the Olympics are going to be postponed, which you don't know when they'll be postponed to, but that's a huge cash cow for NBC. Obviously, Fox and ESPN right now are reeling because they have to show, old, and my thing is, and again, it sounds like, and we're not a politics podcast or anything like that, but it sounds like there's a chance that the president is going to basically lower some of the restrictions on people staying home to try to revive the economy, which means, again, like, I think obviously there's a chance of catastrophe here with respect to deaths and people being sick and all that kind of stuff. And they're weighing that against like economics, right? And then the fact that you can't shut down the economy for 4 months and expect things to be good either, right? You have to, this is a mini-max problem. And I think what ends up happening is we have to significantly reorient what we think is normal, and I think when it comes down to watching football in large crowded stadiums during the 2020 season, that's probably not a realistic bar for what's normal. But watching football, I think having sports, it helps keep people from, it keeps people home, which is part of the bit. And so I think that they'll be creative enough. They have 5 months until the end of the preseason. So I think that, certainly there's a chance that they're thinking about something that will mitigate both risks, the risk of losing the season and the risk of getting more people sick.
All right, draft props.
Okay. So these are I've seen them on MyBookie. I've seen them on Bet Online. I've seen, so there might be different prices for different situations. Just go ahead and shop around. Obviously, you guys are all smart. Here's one that I really like. I really like Jalen Hurts in the third round plus 150.
He's not going in the first.
I don't think he's going in the first.
And then I think you've got a chance where there's like no quarterbacks taken in the second. Like
this reminds me of Mason Rudolph.
Interesting. Yeah.
So in 2018, we had the 5 quarterbacks going round 1, and there was a chance that people were thinking about Mason Rudolph, but then Mason lasted until the 3rd round, because I think once like the first round quarterback thing goes away, people sort of forget about the position for a little bit, and I think that's where sort of Hurts falls in. So his odds-on favorite is 2nd round, but I think if you go 3rd round, I think you get a little bit more value.
I agree. I like it. You have a couple of props on here for the 3rd pick. So Okuda right now is plus 150.
Yeah.
And if we know anything about the Lions, it's that they're trying to be the Patriots. And the Patriots have never invested heavily in defensive line. So if Chase Young and Okuda are still there, you're getting plus money with Okuda. I'm down with it.
Well, I don't even think it's not even that so much to me. It's if Chase Young goes 2nd.
Oh, sure, there's that too. I mean, I just assume right now that someone's either going to take Tua or trade up one.
Yeah. So and that's also why I have Tua as the 3rd pick plus 200, because I do think there might be a chance that Washington or a team that trades up thinks that they need Chase Young in that spot more than they need to breathe, and Tua or Okuda end up being the 3rd preferred player in the draft.
See that as well. What about Jordan Love, 3rd quarterback taken?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, plus 325, I think it's a really good value, because there are people who look at Herbert and think to themselves, okay, Herbert had everything, and it's not true, right? I mean, Herbert had his issues from a support standpoint, but they're going to say, oh, he played for a Power 5, he had a good offensive line, blah, 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 blah. And Jordan Love had nothing around him, right? He's got a better arm, he's more toolsy, all that kind of nonsense. And I think that there's a better than 1 in 4 chance that a team likes him better and might take him instead of taking Herbert.
I'm with you there. First wide receiver drafted. So CeeDee Lamb is minus 130, Jerry Jeudy plus 130, Henry Ruggs plus 700, Field plus 1,000. I am tempted, of course, by Henry Ruggs at plus 700. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I actually think Lamb at minus 130 is not a terrible. Or no, sorry, I'm sorry. Jeudy at plus 130 is probably the best value on that board.
He's pretty much the consensus number one guy.
Yeah, and he's better than Lamb. And I think you can make a case, like we like Ruggs a little bit more because of the type, but you can make a case that Judy's better than Ruggs too. So if you get a plus 130 on a thing that I think is better than 50%, of course you take it. So maybe the play here is to sprinkle a little bit on both Alabama wide receivers. Yeah.
I like it. Any others?
Well, we had the first offensive lineman taken, which is Wirfs, Becton, Wills, and Thomas. Thomas is currently plus 1,100, which is the same price I got Brady to Tampa Bay for. And so just as a I would say Thomas is probably better than a 1 in 10 chance to be the first lineman taken. So I think that's worth at least a little bit of a sprinkle.
I also like Becton at plus 150 because that is as crazy as that would be the craziness that I would have come to expect from the NFL draft, which is a guy that we think is like a much bigger crapshoot than people are giving him credit for based on his measurables.
Yep.
So I don't think that is all that either. Cool. Quickly, before we get out of here, your thoughts on the Rams logo. You hate it?
Well, we are in a mitigation phase of the world right now. So, is it great? No. Is it the worst that it could ever have been? No.
I like that. So here's my official take. I hate the LA with the ram horn because I legitimately think it looks like it could be a Chargers logo.
Yeah.
But I really like the ram, like just the ram head. I think that looks pretty good.
If they keep their uniforms basically the same, that color blue and that color yellow, and I think it's a disaster averted.
Yes, I would agree. That's my take. Cool. Only other thing we had on here was that Joe Buck is calling videos for people. Did you send any videos to him?
No, I told them, have them be realistic. Like don't have Buck be like, and the Vikings win the Super Bowl, because it's like, just have them, just give them realistic ones.
Well, he said send videos of what you're doing at home, and I'll work on my play-by-play. So this opens up a real can of worms that I don't know if he wanted.
Yeah.
What do you think the worst, my daily routine, what would be the worst thing that I could send him a video?
So he'd be like, and George flips out about an avocado that is not ripe in his Uber Eats bag.
I don't order Uber Eats.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I
would just flip out because an avocado wasn't right. That's very possible.
Yeah. So, I don't know that it could. Yeah. Eric gets ripped on for not paying enough attention to the people in his house.
Yes. I was trying to think of things that you might do. But I don't know if your house. So the thing that came to mind was like in the office, you just grab like handfuls of nuts.
Peanuts.
Mixed nuts. Yes, mixed nuts from the. That would be pretty funny. From the snack lounge. And I think it would be funny to see him narrate you having with this bowl of like snacks that you snack on and then leave and then go somewhere else. And I think it'd be funny to hear him talk about the what's remaining in that.
What about Steve's Sway Walk, where he like runs into like 5 things on the way to?
That'd be a good one as well.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one as well. Cool, man. This was our show. We will be back on Thursday. I should remind everyone that the new draft guide is out, and it is awesome. So you want to head to PFF.com. We might give away some Edge subscriptions too that will give you access to it. So stay tuned to everything at PFF, and go to PFF.com to read all the great content. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys.